Hi, I'm Lou Gramm, and you're listening to Monsters, Madness, and Magic right here.
All right, Lou, take us back in time. You're a youngster. Are you a book reader, fort builder, troublemaker, or all of the above?
All the above. All the above. Yes, and more.
So, since you're all the above, let's start with books then. Did you have an author or maybe a genre that you leaned towards growing up?
It was always history. I remember reading the biography of Wyatt Earp, of Daniel Boone, historical figures, mostly in our country's history.
I'm the same. I guess most kids go through like a cowboy or a dinosaur phase. I was a Billy the Kid fan growing up.
That's right. That's right. I didn't care which side of the law they were on. I just like to read something interesting and with a lot of action in it.
Yeah, yeah. So when you say you were causing trouble, is it knocking mailboxes off the post or?
Not quite anything like that, but we'd be playing a game of touch football with a bunch of kids my age or sometimes a little younger, and the touch game eventually would descend into tackle, and ultimately somebody would go home crying.
So whereabouts did you grow up, by the way?
In Rochester, New York, my hometown forever. Well, I did move to Westchester County, right above New York City, when Foreigner started,
Hmm.
because it was so expensive to live in New York City, and the kind of stipend I was given before the first album was released was enough to get me a one-bedroom apartment out of the city.
Lou, what about your parents? Were either of them musically inclined? Do you think that's where you got the roots from?
I'm sure it was. My dad played trumpet. He was a very good trumpet player. And when he was in high school and a little after, he had a big band, the
Mhm.
big bands. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And ultimately, he was looking for a singer, and this sweet little strawberry blonde came and auditioned and got the job, and that ended up being my mom.
Mm. So your dad taught you a lot about music early on, you say?
Yes, she did. I remember when he'd come home from work, and on the weekends, he'd always have the big band jazz station playing in the background to
Mm.
everything that we were doing around the house. And he my mom had told him that when they got married and they started a family, that he couldn't be out playing clubs till 2 in the morning, and then being to work the next day at 6:30. That doesn't make a for a good life.
Right.
And he worked at a metal facilitating factory. They made desks and file cabinets and things. He operated the shears that would cut the big metal pieces into shape. And one wrong move on those, you could lose a finger or a hand. You know.
Yeah, no more trumpet.
Yep. So my mom more or less convinced him to put the trumpet away for a while, and that ended up being 22 years
Mm. Mm.
until all the kids were grown and out of the house. Then my dad picked up his horn, started practicing, got in touch with a couple guys that he played with when he was young, and found out that they were still playing, and they put together a big band in the 80s and 90s.
Wow, that's a cool story. So he did pick it back up.
Picked it back up, yeah. And we lived in the town of Gates, and it was a swing band, so the band was called the Gate Swingers. And I actually got a chance to sit in with them a couple times and sing a couple of those songs from the 40s.
So what did your dad think when you decided to pursue music? Was it a proud moment for him?
It was a problem for my mom and dad
Mm.
because although they really didn't know the extent of what that kind of life could be, they knew from their experiences that if somehow I was weak or started off on the wrong foot or something, that it could lead to alcoholism and drug abuse and washing out.
Right.
So they were very concerned about that for me. They didn't want that.
So Lou, when you think back to formative films and TV shows that you grew up on, what comes to mind?
Rawhide,
Mm.
uh, definitely, The Rebel, Nick Adams. Gunsmoke for sure.
Mm-mm. Western fan then, just in
Big time.
general. First movie you saw in theaters, do you remember that?
Old Yeller.
Oh, that's a rough one.
It's a great movie, but the ending is terrible.
Yeah, I bet there wasn't a dry in the theater.
Right? Yes, you're totally right.
So this is just something I like to ask everyone, just a general question, because you never know. What scared you as a kid?
The neighborhood I was in, my street was a good street, and some of the streets right around there were good, but in general, it was a very tumultuous, somewhat violent neighborhood. Cop cars getting turned over and burned, and people getting knifed and stuff. My brother was in his first year at West High School in that area, and one day after school, he found everybody running like crazy down the hallways and out the front door. He said, and he saw police cars in the street, and on one side were the kids from the high school, and on the other side were people from the neighborhood, and they met in the middle, and there were knifings, and I think three or four people died. A
Holy
couple of them,
shit!
a couple of them were the high school students, and it was a big mess. And when my parents were worried about him even getting home, but he did get home and he was okay. But within the next week, there were about 7 or 8 houses on my street that went for sale,
I can imagine.
and ours was one of them.
Was that your older brother?
Yes, it is.
Got you,
Who's the
got you.
drummer, who's the drummer in my band?
So was it always the voice for you, Lou? Did you ever pick up an instrument or anything, or did you just?
I began as a drummer.
Oh, okay.
I started taking lessons when I was 8 years old. I ended up in the school band playing timpani. Yeah, timpani is the big brass kettle
Okay.
drum.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I got you.
and then I was in marching band playing the big field drum,
Mm.
which weighed a ton. And finally, after I heard the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, I talked my dad into finding me a set of drums so I could start learning how to play that. And he couldn't afford to get me a new set or even a good used set. He went to his brother who used to play drums back in the 40s and got his set that he didn't use anymore. And the bass drum was about 26 inches, high. And the tom toms clipped onto the rim of the bass drum. It was primitive, very primitive. But it was my first set of drums, and I managed to get them set up the way I wanted and practiced every day.
You got to start somewhere.
And listen to this now. When I was done practicing, I'd leave the basement and go out and go down the street and play with my friends. And then after supper, I'd go down to play my drums again, and I'd sit on the stool, and I couldn't even hit the sticks on the snare drum because the snare drum was so high. I couldn't reach the cymbals anymore; they were too far away. And I'm thinking to myself, what is going on here? So the next day when I practiced the drums and I was going to go out to play with my friends after, instead of running down the street to play with my friends, I ran around to the other side of the house and looked in the basement window. Who do you think I saw there? Ben. Because Ben was playing trumpet. My dad was teaching Ben trumpet. Ben wanted to play drums. So every time I left to go down the street, he'd go down and set the drums up to his size, who he's bigger than me.
Right.
But when he was done, he'd just walk away. He didn't think about me sitting down there and not be able to reach the drums. Yeah. He went on to be a Berkeley graduate for percussion.
Wow. So you could
Yeah,
really, really bang them on.
he took it seriously. Yeah.
So is there a moment where you can point to early on, Lou, where you did discover your voice that you could sing?
Actually, I wasn't in the school choir or the church choir, but when I was playing drums and there were other people singing in the band that I was in, I was always singing strong background or the number two harmony,
Hmm.
and then it got to the point when we stopped doing cover songs and started writing our own material. And I was singing all that material while playing drums, just like Phil Collins and some of the other guys. But we were finding that from behind a set of drums, I wasn't able to put the emotion of the song across. I was too busy, hitting things. So we decided to look for a lead singer. And we looked and we looked and we auditioned and we couldn't find anybody that could fit the bill. But suddenly we found a drummer that was
Mm.
a good drummer. So I reluctantly got off the set of drums and went up to the front. And that then I started to become a singer.
Did you ever have to deal with any stage fright or anything like that throughout your career? Or maybe even early on?
Early on, I did. When I first became the singer, the thought of going on stage with the focus on me was really frightening.
Hmm.
And I remember some shows in Foreigner, even after the band had achieved a modicum of success and we were playing big venues, to like to be on with the Eagles and Fleetwood Mac, and then
Yeah.
Foreigner. It was just a very intimidating situation. I had to muster all my confidence and bravado and go out there and kick butt.
Yeah. Yeah. And you did. So, what do you recall about your very first time on stage, whatever you consider that to be? With your very first band in a bar or whatever.
It was a bar. It was like a truck stop with a bar,
Mm.
and it was called Jerry's El Rancho. And it was really people who stopped to get gas and then would pull in for a drink.
Yeah. Was that in New York area?
It was Rochester, New York. Yeah.
Mm. Mm. Gotcha.
And I remember playing my drums with my band called the Infirmary. That band started. The guitar player was 1 year older than me, and in high school with me. The other two guys were about 10 years older than us, in their late 20s, early 30s.
Wow.
And the band for our first band, I couldn't ask for anything better. It was very good, and I had good memories.
When would you say that you started to take music seriously and you realized, maybe I can make a career out of this thing?
Well, I think the next band I was in, we were still covering some people's songs, not so much top 40. We would get the albums and cover secondary album arrangements,
Mm, yeah.
and we were doing bands like Traffic and Humble Pie and Free and people like that. We weren't doing some of the pop stuff that was going on in America. Uh, our manager was the northeastern representative for A&M Records, and he was getting us some the promotional albums and giving them to us, and we would pour over them and find some obscure song that was just cool, and we'd learn it. At that point, we were playing shows and playing about 40% to 50% songs that the audience had never heard before.
So they thought it was original material.
They thought, I don't know what they thought, but there was little to no response when we would finish.
Mm.
You know, and then on top of that, then we started doing original material with that in the mix. And for some reason, our original material started getting more response than the cover songs we were doing. It was we played a show in a big hall with Aerosmith, and there was a representative for Chrysalis Records. I don't know what he was doing there, but he was there, and he really liked the band, and within a month, 6 weeks, we had a deal with Chrysalis Records, and we recorded a single on Chrysalis with a B-side, and they had no offices in the U.S. They were strictly a European label, and they were making plans to come over and set up an office in New York, Nashville, L.A., Chicago, and then they would have the clout and the promotional department to push a record if it was released in the States, because we released our first single. They had no one in the U.S. to promote it.
That's hard. That's hard to think about in the modern age that we live in, where you click a
Isn't it?
button. Yeah, yeah.
It seems like a totally worthless experience. And we were getting good airplay in the Northeast, just on the merit of the song. We were to the point of saying, okay, I think, as you can see, we're doing well in the Northeast. If you had some more promotion people here, we could be doing that well in a good part of the country.
Right.
And by the way, we're ready to start recording our album. And in the meantime, they changed their mind about coming to the US. They totally called off operations in the US, remained a European label, and we asked out of our contract. And they gave us our release. And just about that time, we played a show, I think, with Procol Harum. Yeah, Whiter Shade of Pale was one of their big hits. They were a great band, and we we uh, we got a Capitol Records representative was at that show and heard us and wanted he was on the phone talking to his superiors, and we got signed to a 2 album deal, and we began recording, and we went out opening for Kiss. We were supposed to be it was our second album actually. We got the tour with Kiss. We were supposed to open the whole tour for Kiss. That would have been huge for us. So our first show was in Boston. We played the Boston Music Hall, and the place was packed to the rafters. And we went on, this little band from Rochester, and we kicked butt. We got a standing ovation. And when we were done with our final song, we got the standing ovation. We left the stage, and Kiss's tour manager said, "Hey, can't you hear? You're getting an ovation. Go answer your ovation." So we went back out on stage and played another song, and we got another ovation. And we came off the stage and thanked him, and we went to our dressing room. So it was a big win for us on our first show. And we stuck around and heard Kiss, and they sounded great. And the guys in the band, we had an big old Ford station wagon. We drove back to Rochester from Boston, and the crew guys with all our equipment were about an hour and a half behind us. I got home, I went to bed, and about an hour later, I got a phone call from the head of the crew saying, this show took place on Christmas Eve, by the way, 1975. And the guy from our crew said that they hit a patch of ice, the truck slid off the New York State Thruway and tipped over. And he said that all the 3 guys from the crew, him and 2 other guys, we were all right. He says, we got bumps and bruises. He says, but we're all right. He says, the truck doesn't look so good. He says, a big truck carrier came and put it back on its wheels and put it up on a truck flatbed and took it off the next exit and parked it at a gas station. We went back, me and the bass player went back. We left at about 4:30 in the morning, went back to pick up the guys in the crew. This happened around Albany, that they slid off the expressway.
Mm.
And we went back. It took us 3.5 hours to pick them up. And we tried to get the back door, sliding door of the truck open so we could assess the damage. It went up about 3 inches and wouldn't go any farther. So we all went back and had Christmas with our families, not knowing what it looked like inside that truck.
Oh no.
So we called the station the day after Christmas, and they said they got the door open, come and look. So a couple of us went down, and the amps were all smashed in where the material was in the front. The speakers were shattered. The heads were all broken. The drums, even though they were in cases, when we lifted up, they were out of round. They weren't round anymore. They were oblong.
Damn it.
and the B3 had the legs knocked off from it. So it was a big mess. The truck was totaled. 75% of our instruments were not usable again. And we were supposed to be in Miami on the 27th of December to play a show with Kiss. And there was no way we were going to make it. So I called Kiss's tour manager, let him know what happened to us after we left them that night in Boston. And let him know we were trying to get some financing to put some kind of equipment in a small truck together to continue with our responsibility as an opening act
Right.
and finish the tour. So we got together with our parents, all the guys in Black Sheep, and begged them to finance us to get some used equipment and a somewhat of a used truck to get everything to Florida and for the next bunch of shows we were playing with Kiss. It was a recession in the U.S. at that time. That was the beginning of the gas lines, and nobody's parents had enough money to help us. Even if they put whatever they had together, it wouldn't have cracked the ice on what we needed.
Right.
So our next thought was, let's call the record company because we're promoting an album that is coming out on their label by us performing and getting a following worked up. We sell the albums that benefits them.
Right.
And so we call them, let them know what happened, and ask them if they could finance us to continue this tour that they put us on. They said that they would talk about it and get back to us. 10 minutes later, they got back to us saying that they're not going to do it, and they dropped us from the label.
Holy shit.
Just like that.
How is that legal?
You know, we had a local bumpkin lawyer who wasn't a music attorney, and he couldn't find anything in the contract that said that they couldn't do that. So here we were now with a truck and equipment that's destroyed. This was December. We didn't get our insurance check for the truck and the equipment until May. By that time, we were old boomers. So the guys in the band, we would all meet once a week to talk about what can we do. And we were talking about, we all had part-time jobs. We were saving our money to get little Fender twin reverbs and a small set of used drums and starting to play clubs in Rochester again. That's what we planned on doing. And then while we were in one of those meetings, my dad called me and said, there's this guy named Mick who keeps calling and he wants to talk to you. Now, let me preface this by saying Black Sheep's manager got us into the Auditorium Theater in Rochester to hear Spooky Tooth. And the guitar player in Spooky Tooth at that time was Mick Jones. So we heard Spooky Tooth set and they were very good. And then we got to meet them backstage after. And I had the 2 Black Sheep albums and gave them to Mick. And I said, this is for you to listen to and hear where we are musically, what our style is and our songs and stuff. He thanked me. And apparently he liked what he heard, because his call, when I finally did talk to him, he said, I'm not in Spooky Tooth anymore. I'm putting together a new band. I have management. I have backing. He says, I like the way you sing. He says, I like your style of vocals. He says, would you consider coming to New York and auditioning for this new band of mine? And I paused. I says, Mick, that's an awesome offer. I says, but I'm loyal to my band. We were on the verge of something really good, and an accident took us out. I says, for me to bail out at this point, I says, I couldn't live with myself. I says, I have to keep trying to put my band back together and in a good situation. I says, I appreciate the offer. It sounds very interesting, but I'm going to have to pass. And he says, okay. He says, listen, is it okay if I call you back in about a month? And I said, sure. So I went and told the guys in Black Sheep who it was that called and what the offer was. And they looked at themselves, they looked around, and then they looked at me and they said, what, are you kidding? You're not going to go? I says, this is my band right here. I says, regardless if there's no equipment, this is my band. And they said, we appreciate that, Lou, but we can sense that this is also the end of your band. Why don't you go and see what you can do in New York? So very reluctantly, when Mick called back, I told him that I spoke to the guys and they're encouraging me to go to New York and try out for the band. I said, so I will. So he sent me a ticket and I flew to New York, and it wasn't a live audition. We went to a studio where they had tracks recorded already of Feels Like the First Time, At War with the World. I can't remember what else, a couple other songs. And we would listen to the music, and Mick would sing the melody to me, and we had the words written out. So I went in and started singing the songs. It took a little while to get comfortable doing that,
Yeah.
But I think I sang three of the songs. And when I came back in from the live room, they were like, "That sounded awesome. That was really good, Lou." And so Mick says, he says, "Tomorrow," he says, "you want to come to my apartment and we'll see how it feels like if we work on a new idea." And I said, "Sure." Well, I had gone to New York with a little satchel with two changes of underwear and two changes of socks and one extra T-shirt. I stayed there for almost 3 weeks working with Mick. We wrote "Long Long Way from Home." We were working on "Cold as Ice." We were working on a bunch of different songs, and and then we were rehearsing them. We would work on the songs in the evening, and the next day we would rehearse the songs with the band. Our manager had a penthouse floor. It was an 18th floor, and the offices were all the way around the outside, and the inside was a big empty room that became our rehearsal room. So we were working, and one time I stopped the band. I says, "You know what?" I says, "I've been working hard with you guys for 2.5 weeks, and with you too, Mick." I says, "No one's ever told me if I'm in or not. If I have the job." And they looked at each other, started laughing. They said, "What do you think? We'd work you this hard if you weren't going to be in?" And they said, "Of course you're in."
If you had to pinpoint a place in your own head, Lou, where you're with Foreigner now, is there a moment you can point to where you think, "Oh, holy shit, I've made it"?
We had a booking agency. We got a booking agency. We were doing some rock clubs, in the New York City area, and we Dennis, the drummer, and I lived, like I said, in Westchester, so we would drive in together to rehearsals. And he had a big old Buick Riviera that we were driving in, and it was a great car. And we were on the West Side Highway, which is filled with bumps. Every time the two cement pieces meet, they were like this. So when the wheels would go over, it would slam down. And all of a sudden, we're listening to WNEW, and Scott Muni says, "Here's a new song for you by a brand new band, half Brits, half American. They're called Foreigner, and the song is Feels Like the First Time." And the song came on the radio. We cranked it up. It sounded so good. Dennis was getting so excited he had to pull over to the side of the road. And that was so awesome. And then that's the first inkling that I knew that we had something good and we stood a chance of making it.
You've said in other interviews, Lou, that you felt that your best work with Foreigner was Foreigner 4, the fourth album, album 4. So when you look back on that process of making that album, are you guys just hitting on cylinders at the right time creatively? Is that why you think it popped?
Well, the Head Games album, we had Roy Thomas Baker producing, and the songs were not 100% done. We left a little room for him to put his influence on it, and we were waiting for him to kind of, like Queen sound and some of the other bands he produced. Their sound was special to them. We were waiting for him to kind of put the magic on our music too, and it didn't come.
Mm.
He was having marital problems. He was hitting the bottle heavily, and he would show up like that for our sessions. And so the album was done, and there were good songs on there, but it didn't sound finished to us. It sounded like it was three-quarters done, and we just put it out. And it didn't get the good reviews that the other ones got, and it didn't sell nearly as well as any of the first two albums. So when that album finished and we started writing songs for the next album, we let Ian McDonald and Al Greenwood, we let them go. We needed innovative playing with a fresh mind and no preconceived ideas of what Foreigner should sound like.
Right.
and they were kind of locked into the first two albums, and everything they played on the new song sounded like we heard it before. So we reluctantly let them go. It didn't go well when we let them go. There were hard feelings and stuff, and so it was just Dennis Elliott on drums, Rick Wills on bass, Mick on guitar, and myself on vocals. And we had our producer for that album was Mutt Lang. Okay, he had just gotten done producing AC/DC and a number of other groups that had had big hits, and it was mostly his sound that was appealing to us. But we had heard through friends in those other groups that he was also an idea guy. So he
Mm,
would hear a good song and find ways not to necessarily make it better, but more interesting. You know, so it would catch somebody's ear the first time they heard it,
right.
and he worked with us on things like that. He was a big AC/DC fan, and for instance, when we wrote Jukebox Hero, it starts off with the vocal kind of soft and laid back with the tension building, and it took one guitar, he wanted me to start screaming right from the word go. And I said, that's not the dynamic of the song. Believe me, it goes balls to the wall from about the middle to the end. I says, but the tension is building in those first few verses. I says, you got to let that build before it boils over, and he reluctantly let it go, and confided in me later that his idea really wouldn't have worked for the song if we had accepted it, and he's glad that we stuck to our guns.
I'd say that song worked out pretty well.
Yes. So the sounds that he got, the album sounded spectacular. He had a really good engineer that was with him all the time, and it was just a terrific songs, terrific performance, and great production.
Mm.
And that album ended up being our first number one album.
So following that album, I think the next one was Agent Provocateur. That took a few years to come to fruition. What do you remember the sticking points be there?
For me, the sticking points were when we started writing songs. Most of 9 out of 10 ideas that Mick showed me, he was playing keyboard, and they were mid-tempo, somewhat rock songs, not heavy or anything. They were nice. They were good songs, and the music was nice, but it wasn't dynamic in any stretch of the imagination the way Foreigner 4 was. And then there was I Want to Know What Love Is. And he played me the idea for that song, and I liked it. And I was not a ballad guy, but that song was very special. And we worked on that song. He had a house in Bedford Hills, which was about 20 minutes from my house in Gitona. So I was over his house at least 5 out of 7 nights a week, having dinner and working till 1 or 2 in the morning with him on that song specifically. And we would just hit creative dead ends and walk away from it frustrated. But
Mm.
we kept plugging away, and we ended up getting the body of the song correct and the chorus lyrics and melody the way we wanted it, and we were set to go in and record it. Mick had a friend, a young black guy who he knew from years ago, and he heard the song and told Mick that he had been working for a gospel label the past few years, and he says, I know what the song needs. He says it needs a gospel choir in the choruses. And Mick kind of was taken aback, and he thought about it, and he goes, you could be right. He says, his friend says, I have just the choir for you. It's New Jersey Mass Choir. He says they've had hits on their own in the gospel charts. So on the day that they came down to sing the choruses, I was in one studio next door to where they were, just myself and an engineer, I was singing the lead vocal to the song, which hadn't been done yet. So Mick was consumed with the choir and making sure that they sounded the way they should. And I was in the next studio over singing the lead vocal. Usually, when I would sing the lead vocal, Mick wouldn't be more than 3 feet away from me, offering suggestions, little criticisms, and making sure it came out the way he wanted it. When I walked in there to sing that lead vocal, I didn't see him for 4 hours. And when I saw him, I handed him the tape and I said, "I'm done." And he looked at me like, "What do you mean you're done? I haven't even heard it yet." He didn't say that. But then with the gospel choir there in front of the mics, he played my version with my lead vocals on it and my vocals on the chorus too. And the choir sang along with the choruses. And I got goosebumps and chills all over my body. And I looked over at Mick and he was crying.
So you guys knew that you had it.
Yep, we had it. So when we were recording that album, at the end of completion of every song, Mick and I would sit down at a table, and on a little piece of paper, we would write out what we thought the split was for the song between the two of us as writers, you know. And we'd done that from album one. So like Hot Blooded was 50-50. Double Vision was 60 for Mick, 40 for me. And other songs had different splits. And I wrote 60 for Mick, 40 for me. And I slid that piece of paper over to him and he slid one over to me. So I saw him look at my piece of paper and he didn't smile or anything. He had stone face on it. And I picked up my piece of paper. You know what he had on it? 95.5 for him. We had worked on that song since it was just a little tiny idea for weeks and weeks and weeks until it became a song. Wow. I was involved in the melody, in the arrangement of the song, and plus I sang the ad libs and I sang the hell out of the song. And his best offer was 95.5. And I knew right away why. I was insulted, I was angry, and I knew right away why it was. Because he knew that song was going to be number one, and he wanted it all for himself. But he would sacrifice 5%. I tore the piece of paper up and I says, "Nick, I know why you're doing this." I says, "You want the song for yourself. So it just says Jones under writers." I says, "You do that." I says, "I don't want any part of it." So he did. Song went to number one. The song itself sold millions and millions of songs. I think it went 2.5 times platinum just for the single. It was immediately re-recorded by Winona Judd, re-recorded it and had a worldwide hit with it. So it was a number one hit for 3 other artists. He made millions and millions of dollars off just that song. I didn't see a nickel.
Shit, man.
How do you think that affected us the next time we were going to do an album?
Yeah, I can totally see.
The next album was what? That one was Agent Provocateur, and the next one was, trying to think of it.
Inside Information. There we go.
Yes. So after the album with I Want to Know What Love Is was done, and that was the only. Well, that was Yesterday was a hit too. But that's it. Usually we had 3 or 4 singles. It went deep into the album cuts. But with him playing keyboards most of the time, the FM stations weren't playing the songs either, you know. Right. So after the success of I Want to Know What Love Is, he and his wife, well, we toured to support that album, obviously. And then after the tour was over, he and his wife went on a round the world yacht trip. Okay. He was gone about 4.5 months. In the time that he was gone, I wrote and recorded my first solo album.
The solo album was Ready or Not. So your experience You're pretty much saying that your relationship, your professional relationship, was fractured on "I Want to Know What Love Is," and that's what ushered you to make your first solo album.
That's correct. Yeah,
At the same area, at the same time, I believe, is when you created "Lost in the Shadows" for the Lost Boys soundtrack.
that's
Correct?
exactly right. Yes, it
Mm.
is.
Do you think "I Want to Know What Love Is" did that help you land that opportunity, or was that already in the works?
That was already in the works. Our producer, the director of Lost Boys, called our producer, who knew he was working with, who he knew was working with us, and asked if we had any song ideas that he could possibly use for this new movie, The Lost Boys. And we did have an idea, and we started to. I had some of the words done, but I just, we tailored the lyric to suit ambiguously to suit the movie. And
Right.
we saw roughs of movies, so we knew the flavor of the movie, and made the instrumentation very hard and tough, but a little on the spooky ethereal side. Not ethereal like Yes, ethereal like the Twilight Zone.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
so he was going to use that somewhere in the movie, and he did. He used it during the motorcycle chase.
Did you enjoy the film? Did you see it when you saw it for the first time? Did you ever watch it?
I loved it, and then before it was released, when he decided to use it as the title song, he came to New York, and we did a video of it. All the stars were there and in the video, and we were like in a wooden circus wagon with the wooden bars going down and stuff, and they were all freaks in there. And we had the crew kind of from underneath rocking the wagon, making it look like we were going over uneven tracks and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's the way the video turned out. And so I got to meet everybody, Jason Patrick and Kiefer Sutherland, the whole crew. Yes, it was really fun, really fun. And they gave me one of their leather jackets with the leopard down the leopard painted down the side of one sleeve and stuff. It was an awesome, all around an awesome experience. It was very special. And when I did see the movie in its entirety, it was awesome to hear that song at the top of the movie and then hear it during the motorcycle chase too. It was fantastic.
Just that film in general has one of the best movie soundtracks of all time.
I think so too. And
Mm.
you know what else it has? Lasting power. That it's still a huge audience for it, and I think there will be for a long time coming.
That's a mark of any great music, great movies, is if it stands the test of time.
Like I said, well, he and his wife were on their world cruise. I recorded, and with Atlantic's permission, because they knew he was going for a long time too, released my first solo album, and I got a spot as special guest for Steve Miller,
Wow.
which was a very good break. His audience is a little different than mine. His music is not as hard and as tough, but it's still good music. And us in the opening slot playing Midnight Blue and Ready or Not and some of those songs, his audience gleamed right to us, and we were getting great response for them, and it was awesome being a part of his tour. So apparently, when Mick finally did get back and found out that I wrote and recorded a solo album, it was not only released, but I was on the road promoting it. He went through the roof. He went and started chewing out Atlantic Records people who were high up on the ladder, had control over his career, so to speak, his recording career. So he's chewing people out that he should just have his mouth shut. And then he finally got around to calling me. He says, "You having fun, Lou?" He says, "I hope your album's doing good. I haven't heard it." He goes, "But we're starting to record our next album, and I need you back here now." I says, "Mick," I says, "I'm in the middle of of a tour with Steve Miller promoting my album. I said, if there's anything that I learned from you, was that when you're on the road promoting an album, there should be nothing that discourages you or interrupts that. I says, I'm taking those words as truth. I says, so if you want my help, I says, when the tour's done in another 4 to 5 weeks, I said, I'll be glad to come back to New York and start working on the album.
How do you take that?
Not good. Well, so I finished my tour with Steve Miller. It went fantastic. It made a lot of good for the album, promoting the album like that. And when I finally got back to the studio with Mick and the rest of the guys were, hey Lou, heard your album, it's awesome, man. How's it going? Good luck with that, hugging me and shaking my hand and stuff. And Mick was sulking. The writing on that album didn't go well. I barely had anything with any of the songs. Maybe out of 10 songs, maybe 3 songs I had a part in writing it. And it got to the point that I didn't feel any connection with him creatively,
Right.
and any small idea that I put in, he would say, yeah, great, and then ignore it, not use it. So I saw the way that was going, so I didn't volunteer anything for any songs anymore. He wrote them all, but when it came time for me to sing, I would usually spend a day and a half on each song, unnecessarily so, but that's what we did, because I would sing it and he would make me go back and do it again, telling me to sing this way and sing that phrase that way. And I'd try his ideas and they sucked. They used to be pretty good. I used to take his ideas and kind of make them mine, and they were very good, But the stuff that he was suggesting to me really was maybe his brains fell overboard on that ocean tour, because it didn't sound like anything from the Mick that I knew, and he was insisting that I sing them that way. I was
Right.
out of the creative element of the album, and now he wants to tell me how to sing again, like he did when I first joined the band. So I told him, I appreciate the suggestions, Mick. I says, but I have an idea how I want to sing it. I says, I'm going to sing it 2, maybe 3 times for you right now. I says, and then I'm going home. So I did. I sang it 3 times through. Every one was a little bit different from the other, but all keeping in with the way I heard the song, melody and everything. And he says, don't you want to listen through and pick out the words and the verses that you like better? I says, Mick, doesn't make a difference what I like better. You're going to pick what you like, and that's going to be it. So I says, so you don't need me around for any of that. I'm going home. And that's the way it was for every song on that album. Every song. It was the end of the creative relationship for a little while. That album didn't do beans either. Next to Head Games, it was the worst selling album. Atlantic Records didn't promote it for beans either. That was the end of our relationship with Atlantic Records too.
I know you ultimately leave the band, Lou. How do you guys mend it to the point where you come back for that second stint?
I was finishing up the completion of my second album by that time. I got a call from him in a very friendly voice asking me how I was and how I was doing and how's the album coming, and asked me. Well, don't forget, in between there, he got that other singer, I can't remember what his name is, and they did an album that completely didn't get any airplay, didn't get any sales. And I think Atlantic Records told him he better find me and get on the phone if he wants any band at all to continue.
Mm.
So he did, and asked me when I was done with the album before I started touring. Do you think I could spend a little time and work on this new Foreigner album? So I did a short tour with my for this second solo album, And then I came around, and we started working on Foreigner's last album with the original lineup, or somewhat the original lineup. That name escapes me too. Can you look that up?
Is it Mr. Moonlight?
That's correct. Yes.
Yep, that's it.
And finally, when we were working on that album, Mick let me take the lead in ideas of how to shape the song and the temperament that I liked in the song and stuff, and how filled with quadruple guitars it should be and stuff. And I wanted it thinned out a little bit. I wanted it hard and heavy, but not so many instruments one on top of the other.
Right.
And next to Foreigner 4, that's my favorite album. I think that album turned out great. Have you ever listened to it at all?
I have not. I have not listened to that one.
You really check it out. There's some fantastic songs in there. I think they're as good as almost anything Foreigner's ever done. But we were not with Atlantic. We were with a new record company who promised us the moon, and they didn't promote it. It wasn't even in the record stores when we were touring, and we'd go to a different city. I'd go right to the biggest record store and find Foreigner and leaf through it. I'd find all the other albums, but the new album wasn't in stock. Not because it sold out, because it was never in stock.
Yeah, that's terrible.
So we realized too late that we signed with a record company that made promises and didn't deliver. So that album, we played a couple songs from it on our live show, and most of the people we talked to said they really liked that new song. When is that going to be out? And we were like, it is out.
Wow. That's when you know.
We were all really disappointed because we were all so proud of the album. It was a different, simplified Foreigner, but very tough and very in the pocket, you know. There's so many people who either don't know the album or have never heard it and don't know how to get it. We had an opportunity to do shows in Belgium with an outfit called Night of the Proms. And what it is that they would get guitar players and singers from about 8 or 10 different well-known bands, backed by an all-star European quartet, drums, guitar, keyboards, bass. A full 80-piece orchestra and a 30-voice choir. And we had to pick what two songs we would do. Everybody was able to do 2 songs. And we picked I Want to Know What Love Is and Jukebox Hero. The Crowded House was there, who I have the most respects for. They're great band. Geez, there were a lot of other bands there. Billy Idol was there. Pointer Sisters were there. I can't even think of the lineup, but there were so many great performances from either the keyboard player and the singer, the guitar player and the singer, and then that backed up by the all-star band, the orchestra, and the choir. And we played in Brussels in an indoor tennis facility that had 5 tennis courts in it. Can you imagine 5 full tennis courts? And that place sold out, held 86,000 people.
Wow.
And we played there, I think 5 nights in a row, and they were sold out every night. When we first got there, we were wondering what this big paved area was next to the building. It was for the buses from other countries to pull in and let the people on.
Well, Lou, I'm not going to keep you all afternoon here. Just to wrap up, I like to ask everyone this question. Have you ever had an experience that you would consider supernatural or paranormal?
I don't think so.
Hey, there you go.
Honestly, if it happened, I think I would know it for what it was.
Right.
I can't say that I ever have.
I ask everyone that question. Sometimes I get a 30-minute answer. Sometimes it's 5 seconds.
I mean, I could have made something up, but no.
Right. Well, Lou, it's been a pleasure talking to you, man. I want to thank you for giving me some of your time here.
My pleasure. Nice talking to you.
Bye-bye now.
Take care. All right. Bye-bye.